It's fair to say that coming into the 2023 ICC World Cup final, Australia were, believe it or not, the underdogs. They were up against the India side who they had lost to comprehensively in the group stage. In fact, it was the first game for both teams and India comfortably outplayed them. And not just that, they were up against an Indian side that hadn't actually lost a game throughout the ICC World Cup. So, to actually outmaneuver them and hand them their only loss of the tournament, that too in the final, takes some doing. And it is worth noting that this probably ranks right up there as far as Australia's ICC World Cup wins are concerned, because whilst they did have more dominant showings, if you're looking at 99, if you're looking at 2003 and of course 2007, 2023 was not not one of those trademark ones. Let's say 2015 also was dominant. 2023, though, as I said, they entered as the underdogs but put in a clinical performance for the ages to seal that World Cup title, and a lot of that is down to the brilliance of skipper Pat Cummins. Not only did he marshal his troops brilliantly, not only was he tactically on the button at all times, he also stepped up with a really good performance with the ball. So if you're looking at the performance from Pat Cummins, the skipper, you can't find a single flaw. In fact, I would challenge you to find one problem with the way he ran the game from start to finish, right down from calling the things right at the toss. He was flawless. And after the game, naturally, he spoke about a ton of things. And what we do in this video is talk about some of those in a little bit of detail, starting with, of course, how it is they ended up getting the win in the first place. He said, look, I think we saved our best for the last. Couple of big match players stood up and were pretty stuffed being happy in this case. Everyone adjusted pretty well and bowled some tight lines. Now both of these again were key to why it is they ended up on the winning side. First off, you had some big game players step up. Yes, without a Travis Head, without that knock from Marnus Labuschagne, they probably wouldn't have been able to chase down 241 because India did briefly have them on the ropes. But another thing which probably doesn't get acknowledged as much is the bowling. And as he says, everyone bowled some tight lines. There's a reason India could only score 2 boundaries during the middle overs. It was fantastic disciplined bowling. And yes, the pitch was slow and didn't aid stroke making, but loose balls were still going to get punished. Unfortunately for India, and luckily so for Australia, there were no loose balls to punish. But this wasn't the only major thing he spoke about. The next thing, and perhaps more interestingly, another factor that probably doesn't get talked about as much, the fielding effort that the Aussies put in was truly next level. And as Pat Cummins put it, he said it was desperate fielding for sure. And it all started in the last week in South Africa. The boys were fantastic. We've got an aging side, but everyone still throws themselves around in the game. And that is actually a very good point, because if you're looking at the core of this Australian side, a lot of them are very, very experienced. In fact, go back to 2015 and you've got the likes of David Warner, Steve Smith, even the 3 pacers, Pat Cummins, Hazelwood, Stark of course was also there, don't forget. Then of course there were plenty of other players. A lot of this team, the nucleus of it, already has won games, and in fact many would admit that this is probably the last dance for a lot of these players, at least in the ODI format. Despite that, they were fielding like a bunch of 20-year-olds, and that includes Pat Cummins, by the way, who was throwing himself around at mid-off of all places, right in the circle, to save boundaries. So truly a phenomenal effort from Australia with the field, and it was something that Cummins did acknowledge after the game. Another thing he of course had to talk about was that lovely match-winning knock from Travis Head, who again, it's safe to say, was the difference maker yet again for Australia against India in an ICC final. He did it in the WTC final earlier this year and did so again. And Cummins was full of nothing but praise for how Head functioned. He said that, look, the selectors backed him even when he had a broken hand. It was a big risk that we took and it paid off. Couldn't be happier for Trav. He's a legend. We love him. And again, it is worth noting that Travis Head is someone who for years has been seen as this potential match winner for Australia, but it's only been in the recent past that he's really started to fulfill that potential at a consistent basis. And as I said, they could have actually chosen to get an injury replacement for him because it wasn't looking very good. He healed also in the middle of the group stages, came in, had that 100, but thereafter didn't really put in too many good performances. He saved his best like Australia did for the end. He had that wonderful half century against South Africa, and then of course this blistering century that ensured Australia could in fact get home in the World Cup final. But more so than anything else, and this is something that really bears repeating, this is an Australia side who have been really on top of the cricketing world. Before they even came to India for the World Cup, they did in fact win the ICC World Test Championship final against India, then went on to retain the Ashes against a possessed baseball style England. And that's despite the fact that they were in fact playing in England, where conditions would naturally favor the hosts. So they were already very much a team that were used to winning big tournaments. And where exactly does this ICC World Cup victory rank them? Cummins says that, look, this year will be remembered for a long time, and we have had a lot of success over the winter, and this one tops it all. We are at the top of the mountain, and it's hard to disagree with his assessment. Yes, they're not T20 World Cup champions yet, but given that the T20 World Cup is coming up in about 6-7 odd months at this point, would you be one of those people who'd bet against Australia actually going on to win that too? They do have some upcoming talent. They've phased out some of the younger players, or the older players rather, brought in a few youngsters in T20s. You know, they have the likes of a Cameron Green. Of course, a Marcus Stoinis, Glenn Maxwell would be very handy in a T20 format. There's a Cameron Green who I mentioned earlier. So they do have talent that is coming through. The likes of Sean Abbott, Nathan Ellis also could be very useful in the T20 format. Zampa seems to be aging like fine wine. So really this Australian team should be good enough. But as Cummins rightly said, right now we are at the top of the mountain, and it's really hard to disagree with what Cummins said. But what do you think about what it is that Cummins said after the game? You can let us know that in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap that bell icon, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Don't forget to download the AajTak app, and if you're already on the channel, go right ahead, check out some other videos we've done, and stay tuned. We have plenty more coming your way through the day. For now, from my side though, it's bye-bye.